Hello everyone, my name's Flick and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about Monster Hunter Wilds, the upcoming game released by Capcom in a series I've loved since I first played Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate on Nintendo Wii in October of 2013, that long ago. While there will be some complaints in this video regarding circumstances surrounding the state and release of Monster Hunter Wilds, I do want to make it clear that this is a series of video games I really do care a lot about, and these criticisms are from a place of hoping for positive change going forward, rather than dogpiling on a flawed game's PC launch. I've now, through a series of semi-unfortunate circumstances, been able to try the unoptimised version of Monster Hunter Wilds beta on both a decent but aged PC and a brand new top-of-the-line PC, and wanted to share my thoughts with you, some of which have changed since my first attempt to play the game, and sadly, some that have not. The footage that you're seeing in the background of this video is taken from the second beta at the start of February 2025, which, according to Capcom, does not feature any of the solutions they have claimed to have found in order to improve general game performance on the PC for the full release at the end of the month. This footage is also taken on my new PC hardware, so I'll quickly flash up the specifications in case you're curious about that. The game is running on ultra settings with no frame generation at 60 frames and 1080p, but keep in mind there will be a small amount of quality loss from rendering the footage as part of this video. I did some lossless captures of gameplay of the same beta that you can find on the channel if you're interested. Now, with the preamble out the way, let's get to the meat of it. The first PC beta for Monster Hunter Wilds was made available last year, and after trying it during a 2-hour-long session, give or take, I created and published 2 videos on November 2nd, 2024, entitled Monster Hunter Wilds Runs Like Shit. The title of these 2 videos were my attempt to both convey my dismay at the state of the game and also the blunt truth of what it felt like to try and actually play it. I was far from the only one, with even those playing the beta on consoles suffering from horrific frame rates or the dreaded pixelated monsters looking like you were trying to hunt the box art of Heavy Rain. Running at a smooth 60 frames at 1080p, even with everything dropped to medium or low with frame generation on, were a bar my 6 or 7 year old PC just could not hope to achieve. This, if you watch those videos, frustrated me given that my PC could handle the likes of Space Marine 2 or Dark Tide on medium to high settings comfortably, with both of those games looking, in my opinion, far superior to Monster Hunter Wilds, at least in terms of graphical fidelity. When the original recommended specifications for Monster Hunter Wilds was revealed, it raised more than a few eyebrows. It was asking for some pretty decent tech at a bare minimum, which confused many, including myself, given that 1. The game didn't look that good graphically speaking, and 2. It was still using the RE engine, which is more CPU intensive than GPU. Don't get me wrong, it looks fine maxed out, as I hope you're seeing in the footage I captured, but it's hardly amazing compared to other recent big games like the ones I've mentioned. This is also the most recent RE engine game after Dragon's Dogma 2, which I also did a short video essay on and also ran pretty horribly. The limitations of the engine were being stretched thin then, and that is even more evident now. It was not built for populated large open areas. This was the biggest frustration during my first attempt to play Monster Hunter Wilds on my old PC. Why did it run so poorly but also look so unimpressive? Did having everything set to ultra with no frame generation, which is what you're seeing in the footage, as a reminder, really make a huge difference? The answer is kind of, I guess? Maybe a little? The game running silky smooth in an unoptimised beta with everything maxed out while both streaming and locally recording was pretty awesome and a nice test of my new system, which, in part, I was only able to get thanks to my amazing community, so once again my sincerest thank you to each and every one of them. But many of my original complaints not tied to low frame rates or performance from the first beta are still true in the second, and will most likely still be true in the full game, unfortunately. It doesn't help Monster Hunter Wilds that it feels like the game has a 10% opacity sepia tone filter over everything. This is not just a result of the opening of the game taking place in a desert map, since the opening cutscenes set elsewhere and the trailers featuring other maps still have that same appearance of some kind of messy filter smeared on everything. It's reminiscent of every video game released in the early 2000s when developers didn't know there were other colours besides shades of brown and greys for environments. The colour temperature of the game is also pretty poor, and it really feels like they need to tweak the saturation and contrast a little bit. These are things that should have been noticed along the way. I should mention that even though the beta takes place on a desert map, it isn't just sand everywhere. There's a grassland area, a crystal cave, a couple of mountainsides, and of course a massive electrical storm that sweeps in that for some reason also saps all colour out of the world besides the lightning. It is possible that these abrasive colour palettes and harsh changes with extreme weathers won't be as dissonant with each other on the other maps, but we have to go with what we've been presented with so far. Sometimes the storms look cool as you see lightning strike everywhere and blast in the distance, or sometimes even hitting the wildlife, which is kind of fun, but that comes at the cost of everything else looking so pale and uninteresting. The vast majority of fights against the available large monsters in the beta, at least in part, take place on the huge open sand dune areas, which doesn't help the game feel visually stunning in any way. As a side note, and to break up the complaints, having spent more time with the weapons and exploring the changes to them, they do almost without exception seem to have been made more dramatic, flashy, and just cool in general to use. I'm curious if this was considered to be enough of a change to make up for the rather plain, boring landscapes you'd be fighting in, at least on the map presented in the beta so far. There is a third beta coming the weekend just before release, but once again it's the same build, so the same map. Little details like both you and the monster affecting the sand and seeing bumps, ripples and footprints in it is neat, sure. But is things like that really enough to make up for the poor performance a lot of people are going to have to put up with if they want to play the full game? Those playing on console don't even have the option to upgrade, so are they just out of luck? Quite a few people have asked, what's the point in having this new beta if it has none of the performance enhancements and weapon tweaks Capcom have promised for the full release? Especially given that they've released a more up-to-date benchmark. The hopeful and naive amongst the fanbase say it's because Capcom heard the players' desire to play more of the game ahead of its release. The cynical and bitter think it was always planned as part of their hype campaign ahead of full release. Whichever it may have been, it ended up being a huge risk releasing the same beta with a couple of new monsters added and hoping anyone who plays it reads an additional pop-up that appears when you load the game explaining that the developers are too focused on preparing the full game to alter the beta build. Not sure if that's true, but that is at least what they claim. Judging by both Reddit and the Steam community forums, it appears many people do not have the capacity to read and simply skip past the pop-up explaining the lack of changes in the beta. This led to them believing that the second beta would have the updated performance promised and getting incredulous when they found it still ran terribly for them. Capcom isn't to blame for their players not being able to read, just to be clear, but it certainly still resulted in more than one bullet in their own foot. Taking the stance that a game so poorly held together by duct tape and wishful thinking shouldn't be supported is perfectly fair. I wouldn't blame you if that's where you've landed and decided to stay. I've now played Monster Hunter Wilds on a PC that barely ran it and a PC that can easily run it. When the performance isn't getting in the way of the game, it plays like Monster Hunter should. I've had fun playing in the second beta, especially with friends, although, as a side note, don't get me started on how truly appalling the menus and steps to creating a room to play with friends with are. It is terrible. I like how the weapons feel, and the new monsters and open areas are neat concepts, if not necessarily applied well in an engine not built for it. The visual style, tone, temperature and saturation are all absolutely in need of tweaks, but I'm not sure those changes will happen, sadly. Capcom has almost made sure that Wilds will not reach the same level of success in the West for them as World did, purely by virtue of ensuring many people simply cannot play it. That's a bullet in the foot that they can't blame anyone else for, especially after World itself had a rocky start on PC. They're holding the smoking gun and shrugging. And I suppose that brings us to the final question, really. Will I be playing Monster Hunter Wilds on release? The problem is that it's no longer a fair question. That's the thing. Now that I have a PC that can run it, I'll almost certainly play it. Just gotta swallow the £60 price tag. But if I had my old PC, I'd have been able to play it, but really, really poorly, and at best 30 frames. So the visuals probably would have put me off enough not to bother. Which would have been a great shame and pained me greatly, since as I said at the top of the video, I love this series. I'm a massive Monster Hunter fan, and I've made friends through this series from 12 years ago that I still have to this day. I can't speak on how Wilds runs on consoles. I've seen opposing claims of it being terrible on PS5 or perfectly fine, for example, but whether it's about playing on console or PC, the same general advice of voting with your wallet applies. The extreme hardware requirements for Monster Hunter Wilds are, in my opinion, not reflected in what you see on the screen, so take from that what you will. But keep in mind that it is possible that the finished version released at the end of the month will run much better. I don't think the changes will be particularly drastic in terms of improved performance, but there's always a slither of hope. I'd wait for in-depth, thorough reviews and analysis on performance from trusted content creators and not ones that are on Capcom's payroll before making a purchase if you're at all worried. That's the best way to be safe. And I think that about does it for the little conversation I wanted to have about Monster Hunter Wilds now that the second beta is more or less over. I miss the days when I could safely just look forward to the next Monster Hunter installment without the kind of baggage this one has created for itself, but oh well. And on the off chance anyone at Capcom sees and hears this, please release an HD remaster or re-release of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. It will print money and help cover your losses that you may potentially make on Wilds. Thanks for watching, see you next time, ta-da for now.